Hello everyone. I've been playing around this morning with some more of my bits and pieces that came in mystery bags from Gummiapan.co.uk, and this was one stamp from the latest pack, and I think that is just gorgeous. I think it's a eucalyptus, that's what I think it is, but the sort of the gentle line I just think is lovely. Anyway, what I did was this, and I just thought I'd do a kind of a little bit of playing around, really. So I'll just show you what I did. And the purpose of this, in fact, was to see if I could use up some of the odd stamps and things that I have, some that came from the mystery bags that I wouldn't necessarily use very often as a main feature of a card or a main sentiment of a card, but you can use them for lots of texture within other panels. I love this one, this postmark. I think that's fab. That was in my first mystery bag. I don't remember if I bought this or whether it was in a bag or what, but it says beauty comes in many forms. Very true. This one, only in the darkness can you see the stars, which is a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. So I probably wouldn't use that incredibly often as a sentiment, but I've used it on here quite a few times just to add some texture to the actual composition. So I'll just show you what I did. It was just basically having a play. So here's my stamp. As with all Gummiapan stamps, it's just the rubber. It won't stick to an acrylic block by itself, so I just put a smear of a glue stick, one of these things, onto this block, pop the stamp on top, and we're away. So I looked in my drawer, and I've got quite a lot of this teal coloured card, which I really haven't used very much. So what I thought I'd do, I'll just use a bit more of this, and I'll do something very similar to what I did there. So first of all, a little rub with this anti-static bag, some Versamark, and then we'll do a stamp. And I've got it slightly at an angle, so I think I'll do something similar. I like to be a bit jaunty now and again. Getting risky in my old age. Right, there is my stamping done. So now I would just emboss that in a little silver. I must have had this pot, look, it's nearly gone, but I must have had it for about, I don't know, 15 years or more, a long time. But it's nice. I don't think they make Heat It Up anymore, actually. Very, very pretty. Right. Put this away. And I'll give this a heat, and I'll whiz up the video so that you don't have to hang around kind of watching paint dry, if you know what I mean. There we are. Okay, now the next thing I did, I think, was to cut it down. So let me get my little trimmer, daisy, which is malingering under my desk. We'll just cut this down. Right, now if I go round in turn around a circle, pushing the card up to the top there, I'm going to get it absolutely square. Okay. I think I'll have it a little shorter. Okay, that'll do. Right. Bits away. Now, the next thing I did was to colour the leaves, and to colour them I used some luscious powder. Simply got my brush, which is here, dipped it in some water, got the powder, quick dip in the powder, and then onto a palette. Well, I just covered this up because I thought, well, I can use this still. I don't need to get a whole bunch of this stuff out newly. So there's my first colour, and this one I think I put on the tips of the leaves. Get a bit more on my brush. And these pigments, these pigment powders, turn out slightly different colours dependent upon the base colour that you're putting them onto. If you put them on a light white or whatever cardstock, there'll be one sort of colour showing, and on a darker cardstock, it's slightly different. I think they're called intervention colours or something. I don't remember the precise term. Okay, so there's a little bit of this lightest colour on the leaves. There we go. Let's give that a wash. And what should we do next? The goldy one. This is just reconstituting, you see, what I did before. I will get a bit more. This is grungy gold. I will put a bit more powder in just to give it a bit of strength of colour. Just a bit more. This is just a thin acrylic block that I'm using as a palette, because it meant I could just move it out of the way. Right, using Anne's husband's little tray just to keep those from rolling away. I think that chap should go into business with his 3D printing. Such a clever, clever concept. Right, I'm just doing the bits of the leaves now where they emerge from the stem, and I'm leaving a bit in the middle. Okay, have another little rinse. Right, and the last one is this copper green, it's called. Let's see if we can reconstitute this one. I'm going to add a bit more pigment because it's adding the water has weakened the colour. Okay. Put this one away. Okay. Now I'm just going to fill in the middle. Sort of randomly. It doesn't matter what you do, really. I just had a fancy for doing this, really. So there we go. There we go. Now, to add a little interest, isn't that a lovely effect? Can you see? It's just so simple. Just sloshing a little bit of pigment on. Okay, this bit here, you may be wondering what this is. Well, this is a little of the grungy gold, but what I used was a tiny, tiny bit of my cire à effet that Marie sent me from France. It's furniture wax. I just put a tiny little bit on there and added a little bit of that powder. And with a tiny sponge, what I'm going to do with that is the bit of distressing around the edge. And I'll do that in a little while. So I'm just going to put this on one side again for a moment. Okay. You can see the using of this in the previous video, which I'll put a link to below. Okay, now the next thing I wanted to do was just to add a little bit of kind of interest to the background, quite subtle. So here I've got my postage stamp, and again, as I said before, it won't adhere to an acrylic block as is because it's just the rubber. There's no easy mount on the back, so all I do is that. tiny bit of a glue stick, and on we go. Now what I'm going to do with this is just use some Versamark. Now you can do one of two things with this. You can either just leave it to dry, and what you will get is just a watermark. It says watermark stamp pad, and so the watermark that it gives is just stamping it onto card and leaving it to dry. But we use it for so many other things, don't we? Okay, there's a couple of those. Let's have another one down the bottom here. Okay, so that's my stamp from the postmark. It's a Gummiapan. That was in my mystery bag. Now this one says beauty comes in many forms, and I'm going to do the same sort of thing. I'm going to get some Versamark, and I'm just going to stamp this kind of randomly anywhere. I do apologise if my head gets in the way. This is just adding a bit of, I don't know, a little bit of interest to the edges. And you can, if you want, leave it, as I said, or what I did with this one was to gently brush it with some more dry luscious powder. The longer you leave it before adding the powder, the more subtle the effect will be, because not so much will adhere. The longer you leave it, the more you'll need to set it with a little spritz of water afterwards, because the Versamark will kind of set it if it's got enough. But if you leave it a long time and don't put that on, then you'll need to give it a spritz. Otherwise, the luscious powder might rub off. Okay, now I'm going to use this one. This is the Martin Luther King quote. Well, as I said, I wouldn't use that often by itself, but you can use it to add interest to a background. Any stamps that you have a look through, see what you've got. Any stamps that you've got, particularly sentiment ones, that you don't think you would use incredibly often for what they are intended for, you can use as adding interest to a background. So let's just put some of this on here. It's so subtle. I love it. Absolutely love it. You see, I think it's great. Kind of rough. So what I usually do to do that is with a pair of scissors, and I just drag the scissors across the end like this, and it roughs up the edge of the card. You can see all the bits of the fibres coming off. However, if you're not too happy about holding scissors like this, you can get a little gizmo like this one. Several companies make these distressers. This one is by the same company as this, Sticks to Anything. So all you do is drag the edge of the card through one of these little gaps. And there, it gives you that effect. Because some people may not be too happy holding scissors open like that. So if you're not, there is something that you can get to prevent you having to do that. And you still get the same lovely distressed effect. I'm really rather fond of this. When I first started card making, I didn't know what distressing was. So I saw a local craft shop was doing a class on distressing, so I went along, and I found it an absolute revelation. All the bits of business of, you know, tearing and inking and scratching away like this makes a huge effect. Okay, now let's just get rid of these bits. I've got my little hoover here. This is quite hard to get. You can't just do this to get the bits off because it's silicone and it kind of drags. So I either have to use my little hoover thing or a wet wipe. Okay, now I'm going to bring back my palette that's got my gilding wax that I made using grungy gold, luscious powder and a bit of that French polish. Now, somebody told me if you want to make something similar, had a comment, this is interesting. I haven't tried it, but you may like to try it if you haven't got an equivalent like the indigo blue gilding gum or whatever. If you mix equal parts of white glue, PVA, this kind of stuff, school glue, you know, white glue, mix equal parts of that with hand cream and glue mixed together, and then add your pigment powders, your micas or whatever. That makes a kind of gilding wax as well. Now, I haven't tried it, but it might be worth a go. So just bear that in mind. I think that's kind of a really good notion. And my applicator here is just a tiny bit of dish sponge that I just cut up. They're cheap as chips. I get them from Amazon. Let's just get this kind of any old how. I like it to look a little bit random. So we'll see what we think about the difference between leaving the Versamark to dry and just making a watermark, or brushing on some luscious powder with a dry brush like this Perfect Pearls brush. Okay. Now, if you want to add more interest to this, you could, before you actually started stamping, have done what I did with in a previous video to make an embossed look background. You could die cut lots of little bits of leaves or whatever from similar card and just stick them all over before you start stamping. There's a little one. This was a freebie from Gummiapan. Every time you buy something from Gummiapan, they send you a little freebie. So there. So I don't know what you think, with or without the extra gilding, luscious powders. But again, you should use the stamps you don't use much as interest in a background. This bit here is just this penny black stitched embossing die. It just makes holes into the card, doesn't cut anything out. So that was a quickie today, hopefully, and I hope you got a few ideas from it. And I'll be back with more very soon. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for giving thumbs up. My numbers are still fluctuating up and down, so I think YouTube must be deleting some people's subscriptions. So if you could just check, that would be wonderful. Okay, and on we go to the next project. I'll see you then.